Well, welcome back to all my boredom busters, and hello to all you new hobby hunters. I am your host, Brad Claybaugh, and you have found Brad's Boredom Busters. This is the channel that explores all sorts of arts and crafts, so if you're looking for something new to do, this is the channel for you. So we are in the middle of an art quilt project. This is the third installment of this series. We are working on what I call my humanity quilt. So we were making a wall hanging block from my humanity quilt, as well as an 18-inch pillow cover for a pillow form. But before we continue with this project, Buster, show these fine people what to do if they want to subscribe to our channel. Take it away, Buster. Great job, Buster. Thank you for that. All right, this is the third video in our series. And in this video, we will be concluding the wall hanging quilt as well as the accent pillow cover. So just to recap, up to now, we have taken our tie-dye t-shirt that we're using for the background of this block, and we have applied stabilizer. So after stabilizing the t-shirt, then we cut our sashing and borders and corner blocks, and we got those sewn on. Then we created our appliques and ironed those on. Then after that, we did our quilting. So now we are up to the point where we can do the binding and create the hanging straps for our wall hanger. And then after that, we will put the back on our pillow cover form, and we will then slip the pillow form into that and see the finished results. So what I'll show you next over at the work table, I'll show you how to make the hanging straps for our wall hanger, and then we will also make and apply the binding. So let's get over to the work table and I'll show you that right now. All right, all my beautiful people. So I want to talk to you about the project before we move on with it. Originally, I had said that I was quilting this with the wavy lines for the wall hanging, and then the other one I did stitch in the ditch, and I used this one as the pillow form. But remember in our second video, I mentioned how the quilting kind of distorted it a little bit. And I said it could be stretched out, but I decided that actually this one will work better as the pillow form, because once we create the back and then put our pillow inside it, it'll kind of stretch it out and give it a better shape. So I thought the puffiness on this would work better for the pillow. So to make it work for the pillow, because it had kind of shrank down because of the quilting, I added on an extra outside border to get it up to the size I need to create the form. And so that's where we're at with that one. So this other one will become our art quilt to hang on the wall. And, you know, we did the pebbling in the corners and then stitched in the ditch. And to get this to be about 18 inches and also to make it look similar to the pillow form, I also put a narrow border around that. All right, so that's where we're at now. So now I need to cut our pieces for the hanging loops for the top of this quilt. So let's get into that right now. All right, gang. So now I'm going to show you how to make the hangers for the wall quilt. And I happen to be lucky. I had a scrap of my border, and I trimmed that down to 2 inches wide. I'm going to show you how to do a strap that is basically two-tone. So you'll have your main color in the center, and then the outside edges will be an accent color. And in our case, I'm using the same fabric as the border and then also some black fabric. And so I want to have a 2-inch wide strap, and so my center color I cut exactly at 2 inches, And so now we cut that at 12.5. So I want to cut that in half at 6.25. And basically the formula is for the two-tone, I'm making this strap 2 inches wide, so your center color is cut at 2. Your outside edge color then is cut at 1 inch over, which would be 3. If you were making a 3-inch wide strap, your center color would be cut at 3, and then your outside edge colors would be cut at 4 inches. So I need to trim this to 3 inches. Okay, so the next step is to stitch these together. Oh, actually, no, not next step, wrong. I need to trim these 2 black pieces to the right length because they are too big. So we said we want 6.25. And so that's where we're going to go here. That's 6.25. There we go. All right. Now we're right. On with the show. Okay, so the next thing to do to make your straps is take and put them right sides together. And so you want to line up your right side first. That's just because it's easier for me to deal with it that way. We will stitch down with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then we'll take it out, flip it around, and then it gets a little awkward, but then you have to pull this edge over to this edge and stitch it as well. And then we'll bring it over here and iron that out. That'll create our outside borders. And then you'll pull it right sides out. I'll show you that. And then we iron it. All right, let's stitch this together. Okay, so then, like I said, then you take and just pull this over, line up the other side, and then we stitch that. Okay, so now that we've got a cylinder made, basically, so now we just want to turn that right side out. Okay, there we go. All right, so now that's ready to be ironed out. I say you just lay that out flat, eyeball, trying to keep both edges even. Okay. There's our straps. All right, so let's grab the quilt. All right, so now we want to stitch these on the back. And what I'm going to do, what you do is fold that in half. And I am going to line it up with the edge of these cornerstones. Basically, the hanger is the same width as a cornerstone minus this border. So what you want to do, and you can take a pin and pin it in place, probably is the best thing to do. Because we stitched in the ditch and then did the pebbling on the corners, I can see exactly where that is. So we want to lay that right in line with the edge of the corner. Okay, and so now take this to your machine and just do like an 1/8 inch seam. When we put our binding on, then that'll catch the end of the strap and lock it in better. So this is just to basically hold it in place until we get our binding on. So run that through your machine. Okay, so now you can take the pins out from that. Okay, so now we can set this aside. Now we've got to make our binding for the edge, so I'll show you that next. Now we're going to create the binding to go around the wall hanging quilt. And so I've trued up this edge. If you remember from previous videos, the best way to true up an edge is to fold your fabric in half. This piece is about 24 or a little over 24 inches long. So I folded that in half. Put the folded edge along one of the lines on my cutting mat. And then using one of the vertical lines, cut along there. And so that gives you a true 90 edge there. So your binding strips you want to cut at 2.5 inches wide. And because our quilt is 18 square, and these are a little over 24 inches in overall length when it's unfolded. So I'll cut 4 strips. That'll give me more than enough to go around the 18-inch square quilt. And leave yourself plenty of extra for overlap, and you'll see that when we go to finish off the binding, you need a good amount at the bottom to overlap so you can stitch it together. I'll show you that method when we get to that point. So there's my 4 pieces. All right, so now the way we join all 4 strips together so you have enough to go around your quilt is you take one, and I'm using solids, so for me it's not as important, but if you are using a print for your binding, then you want to lay the right sides together. So you take one, let me make sure you can see this in the camera. Lay out one strip. So take your fabric. If you have a printed fabric, then lay right sides together. Overlap it 3/8 of an inch going up and to the side. That way you can see where you need to stitch, because Then you'll take this to your sewing machine and you'll stitch diagonally from point to point here. And I'm just drawing a line so you can see. Hopefully that shows up, but you want to stitch right there. So let's take it to the sewing machine. I'll show you that. All right, let's get this stitched out. All right, so you get that stitched diagonally, and then you can, with scissors or your rolling cutter, just trim off the excess, leave yourself about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And see, that makes a nice transition there, so you have a continuous piece that way. And so you just keep joining your pieces together in the same fashion. Always right sides together. So this piece was the one that was facing down. Now it's facing up and going horizontally. You'll take your next piece and lay that over. And then you'll stitch diagonally from corner to corner. And just keep doing that until you have all your pieces put together for your binding. So then you can take these pieces over to your ironing board and iron those out flat. So now the next step is actually to iron your strip in half. So I'll show you that right now. All right, so yes, now it's time to take your binding strips and iron it in half. So you'll want to make sure your seam, can you see that? There you go. Make sure the seam is going to be folded to the inside of the binding. You want to use steam to make sure you really set that crease that you're ironing into it. All right, so there's our binding ironed up. So let's get back to the sewing machine and I'll show you how we attach it. All right, all my dude and dudettes, so we've got our binding made. We've got our quilt here. And so what you want to do, you want to start your binding at the bottom, but you want to leave a pretty good gap because you're going to have to join it together once you go all the way around. And so you need enough room to manipulate to get the end underneath your sewing machine. Oh, I'd say leave a good 8 inches at least, and leave a long enough tail that overhangs where you're going to finish your binding. I prefer to start on the back and finish on the front. I like that method primarily because I can control kind of how I am anchoring down the hangers. So if I come around and start my first stitching on the back, when I fold it over, then I feel like I have just a cleaner transition that way. All right, so let's get started on this. So you're going to take your binding, like I said, and come well past the center. You're going to take your raw edge and line that up to the raw edge of your quilt. Okay, so at this point, when you come to your corners, this is our first corner, stop at a 1/4 inch away from the edge. And the way we create the corner is then you want to fold back the binding to create a 45-degree angle here, and then bring that back over onto itself so it squares off to the top edge here. Then you'll come in a 1/4 inch to continue stitching down the edge of your quilt. And you'll also want to back stitch when you start. Okay, here we are again at another corner, same method, but here's a little note also. Your hangers, make sure that you keep them far enough away from the corner so they don't kind of interfere with putting on the binding. When you get to your hanger, just go slow over it so it's a lot thicker there. But you want to make sure that gets stitched in really well. Okay, so I stopped short on that one as well so we can join these two ends together. All right, gang, so now we've put the binding on. We've gotten all the way around the quilt. We left the gap so it makes it easier to make our final connection. So I've learned a way that I find is rather easy to do. It's not as technical, and that is to cut your first end where you started at 45 degrees. You can do that in numerous ways. I use a quilting ruler that has 45-degree mark on it. And what you do is take the 45-degree line that up to the outside edge of the binding. And then that makes this 45-degree angle cut. So you cut that at your angle. Take the piece that you just cut and fold it back about 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and then iron that. That gives you a finished edge when we get ready to join it to the other piece. Okay. There we go. Okay, that's ironed. And then now that you got that ironed over, just come and cut this little dog ear off. All right. Now what we're trying to achieve is creating a pocket. So then we will take our other piece and tuck that in, and then that'll get stitched together. So now that we have, that's the first step. The next step is to cut the second tail long enough to tuck inside. Give yourself a good ½ inch, 3/4 of an inch extra or more. And then open up the first piece, lay that out flat. Then lay the second one inside that. Go. And then you can put a straight pin through that to hold it in place. Maybe even a couple of them. Okay, and so now you want to take your quilt. You'll have to kind of fold it so you can pull that out from the center. And this is just going to take really patience and some careful manipulation, but this does work. Well, let me show you. And then what you want to do is just open it up flat, and where you ironed the 45, just top stitch that together, and then we'll take that to the ironing table and fold that again and iron that back in half, and then we can finish stitching it to the quilt. So let's get this closed up. All right, so then we just top stitch that. Just make sure you don't accidentally stitch one of the bottom loose ends to the back. All right, so that's that. Pull your pins out. All right, now you can trim off the excess bulk from the inside. Then we can iron that down in half again. And then that just gets stitched into place. And that'll finish off the application of the binding for the back side. Then I'll show you the next part of working with the binding. So now is when we turn over our quilt and flip the binding to the front. All right, so what I usually like to do then is, well, you have a lot of loose threads like the black on this black fabric likes to unravel. So clean up any of these long threads that might not get tucked into your binding. So I usually start at the bottom again. Take and roll over your binding. And I usually try to stitch up very close to the edge of the binding. And in this case, because I have this black border around it and the black binding, it'll actually help the binding kind of disappear. So I'm going to go around and I'll show you then how we treat the corners when we get that far again. Okay, so let's see that you can see this. So I stitched along to the corner. I stopped a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the quilt. And now what you're going to do is take your binding and fold it over and create a mitered corner. Hopefully you can see that. And then you're going to put this under your presser foot, drop it down right at the intersection of the miter, and then continue down the edge of your binding. Okay, here again, came to another corner, so we stop a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the quilt, then take the next side of our binding, fold that over so we create a mitered corner. We'll start stitching right at the transition of the 45-degree point of the miter, back stitch, and then just continue down. We're at the top, so we also have the addition of our hanging straps. It's going to be additionally thick in this area, so just take it slow. But just keep going as we have in the bottom and along this first side. We'll continue around all the way to the bottom. And then when we get to where we started at the bottom, we'll just overlap our stitch, back stitch, and then we're done. Okay, aside from trimming off some threads on the back side, that is our quilt. So there's the hangers. And so that is complete. Like I say, just trimming off some threads on the back side. That's how you basically do the humanity quilt. This is basically what I did for the large one that I showed you in the previous video. All right, so we can transition now to making the pillow. Let's work on that next. All right, my Buster buddies. So I had a little technical difficulty at this point in the video. The portion of the video for my overhead camera creating the back of the pillow cover, somehow I don't have that. I don't know if it got corrupted and didn't download, or I forgot to turn on the camera. That's possible too. I do use two cameras. I have the low one for the sewing machine. That one came out fine, and it has some audio as well as video, but I don't have the overhead, and that shows cutting the two back panels for the pillow cover. So let me walk you through that now. So we are starting with an 18-inch pillow form. And so you want the front panel of your pillow form to also be 18 inches. The back two panels are cut at 18 inches wide, and then you take your 18 inches, divide that in half, which is 9, but then you also add on 3 inches. So you'll have two panels that you cut at 12 by 18 inches. After you get those cut, you want to take one of your long 18-inch edges and fold and iron that over by 1 inch. And then top stitch that. That creates the two pieces that gets sewn on to your front panel. You'll take your front panel, lay that face up, and then depending on your fabric, I'm using a black solid, so there is really no right or wrong side. But if you're using a print fabric, then you'll lay that on your front panel face down. So you want your good faces facing each other. And pin that in place to keep that stable while you take it to your sewing machine. And give it maybe a little bit more than a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but stitch all the way around your panel. Back stitch when you come all the way around to where you started, and cut your thread, and then that's that. And then once you're done with that, then turn it right sides out, and then you're ready to open up the back envelope part and put your pillow form inside, and then you're basically done. Hopefully the visuals and the instruction was adequate enough for you to create your pillow. I would have shown you my pillow for the back panel, but I had actually already sold it, so I don't even have it to show you what the back looks like once it's put together. All right, gang, so here's our finished projects. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this video. And I know it was rather lengthy. I hope you stuck it out, but there's a lot of information to give you, so it really took quite a bit of time. The wall hanger is really nice with the little hanging tabs, and then our pillow came out great as well. So hey, let's get over to the table and we'll talk about something new coming up. All right, see you over there. All right, all my Buster buddies. So that was quite an epic project. Yes, I know that took quite a bit of time, and I hope you stuck it out for all 3 videos. I do think both projects came out real well, and I hope you learned something on this one. I know we had a lot of new information on this project, and I hope I was able to make it clear enough to follow. Let's try another new project next time, maybe one that doesn't quite take so much time. Well, let's try something like brain surgery, huh? Yeah, that won't take quite as much time as this project did. Yeah, get your X-Acto blades out and sharpen them up. Let's try something new. Hey, not quite sure where we're going to go from here. I've got some ideas, so just come back for our next video, and it'll be a surprise. But it'll be a good one, and I promise you it won't be as long as this one. So, hey, if you like this video, though, please give me a thumbs up. Please share my videos around. That really helps out my channel. And don't forget, if you haven't subscribed yet, well, do so. And then hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. All right, hey, I love you all, and thanks for watching. Peace out, baby, and go bust out some art.